Anyways.
I've got some good worm action.
Fuck yeah.
Getting rid of that.
Since I found serenity, you can't take the sky from me.
Good evening, everybody. This is Last Minute Movies, new series that we coined as Last Minute Movies After Dark, where it's a little more...
It's dark here.
Yeah, it's a little more
Wow.
unedited. We're a little more unhinged. We're like stoned and drunk, and we
I'm pretty drunk right
discuss
now.
like
I'm not gonna lie.
shows and movies that we really love here in a more kind of laid back and unedited fashion.
It is I don't know, but it's a meaty show. It's got like a
Yeah.
savory flavor to it. Like
Yeah.
if I had to describe how Firefly tastes in my mouth, it's like a smoked prime rib, you know? Like it's not good it's not necessarily good for me, but it's
Yeah.
delicious and I just want to keep eating it.
Just like Wild West itself, it's not really good for you, but it has its moments.
Exactly. Let's chat about Joss Whedon's masterpiece, arguably. I believe this was his third television show, was Firefly, following Buffy and then Angel, the Buffy spinoff.
Bro, fucking Buffy. Damn.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never really been a Buffy guy. I gave it a shot a couple times. I have friends who like think Buffy is the best television ever got. I don't really get it. I think it's a little too quirky, like Tumblr core type shit.
Yeah.
I think Whedon's style, in its very irreverent, sort of quippy, fast dialogue, is really befitting of this very dark world that is Firefly and Serenity. Firefly and Serenity is so miserable, and you really get uplifted by the way the characters talk to each other in that incredibly fast, quippy edge, you know?
The Space Family.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
And full disclosure, for me, I'm kind of famous for fetishizing Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, those are my favorite movies of all time. I make that everyone's business. So I feel like I was kind of destined to love Firefly, which I did. Because really, you see the building blocks for Guardians of the Galaxy in Firefly with this kind of irreverent group of misfits that are traveling the cosmos and find each other and ultimately find a team and a family. And that's what's at the heart of Firefly and what makes it good, despite the fact that I think all of the moving parts of Firefly should not work.
Yeah.
I don't think Firefly should have worked as well as it did.
Yeah.
And there's a few different reasons for that. One of them being, I don't think Joss Whedon is really that innovative of a writer.
In regards
What do you
to
think?
writing, the show has kind of captured everyone's nostalgia, for sure. But when I was rewatching it, I realized that like the writing is it's serving to the plot primarily, and it's very centered. And it actually made me think of Buffy because the dynamics between the characters were fleshed out rather well, right? But then when you look at it from like the structural perspective, it's just all plot. It's all like a Western style thing where will they, won't they kind of situation. And the dynamic just like, it's so consistent that you don't get tired of it because of how he wields that, in my opinion at least. Just because like the idea of the Space Family and like just like the way they all function with each other. I mean, I will always be comparing the shit to Cowboy Bebop like every day.
I think Firefly, as you were saying, Igor, doesn't really exist on the merit of its story so much as it exists on the merit of the cast's chemistry. 100% this show is relying completely on the talent of an incredible ensemble cast of performers that are willing to really flesh out their characters, headed by Nathan Fillion. I would argue, and members of the cast have argued, that Nathan Fillion is more so the showrunner than Joss fucking Whedon is.
Yeah, you know, I can't help but agree because, like, you know, watching it now, I couldn't help but think of Mandalorian's character a little bit. Like that face, the charm that Pedro Pascal gives it when it's helmetless. I couldn't help but connect the two a little bit. Like, not completely, but the charm, you know, that charm is there of a showrunner vibe. Yeah. And, I mean, also there's like a subtle daddy vibe as well, which you can't help but but love.
Big time. Oh, I don't even know if it's subtle. Like the way that Kaylee and Captain Mal interact, like she treats him like a father figure, and the way he holds down the fort, and he's this kind of tough love figure, but he cares about everyone on the ship so much. Yeah. And by the end, he even develops that kind of father-daughter relationship with River. Spoilers obviously for Serenity,
which takes
but
him
people
a lot
knew that.
of time because River is a whole fucking separate character we gotta bring up.
Exactly, because I feel like those two characters are what is at the heart of Firefly. It's like reckoning the human with the inhuman. It's reckoning the unknowability of space, which exists within Summer, and the very grounded, tough working man that exists within Mal. And that's the meeting of those two genres. Mal is the Western and Summer is the sci-fi. Precisely. And it takes until the end of Serenity for them to discover a bond.
That's so true. But also, like, it's just full of so many other characters, and the show would have worked by itself with just that arc alone. But what makes it Firefly, what makes it so special, and why it stays in people's minds is primarily, I think, because of all the other surrounding characters. Just like, if this show did not have the cast it did, and they did not do the job they did, on it, it would have sucked. It would have been like, how many sci-fi shows can you think about that have been made in early 2000s with a shit CG, with a shit story that nobody cared about? And the fact that I can't think of any title just speaks volumes, because there have been dozens and dozens of shows and movies inspired by, the success of The Matrix and many others that wanted to do the same thing, but they just did not have what it takes knowledge-wise, communication-wise, resource-wise to make something worthy. Sometimes it was just shit story, but most of the time we're just faced with really shitty CG. Like Firefly is just in that special place where it just works out, and most of like the space shots actually work for me still, even in like 2023. And again, like the Cowboy fucking Bebop aesthetic, I can't help but love that. And like when space is silent, I love that shit. The only movie for me that did not nail silent space perfectly was actually Gravity, ironically enough. But that's just because
I've never actually seen it.
Oh, you gotta watch it. Like, first viewing, it's incredible. And like second and third, it just kind of deteriorates really fast. But, Cowboy Bebop did this, Firefly did this, Gravity did this. Being able to show space... Oh, Interstellar, of course, did this. Just showing space as a silent, vacuum without playing soundtracks over it. That's not trying to be heroic. That's just trying to be atmospheric. The fact that, like, the show just kept taking these editorial directions and kept taking these turns in the edit room, specifically, to make this shit so atmospheric and so layered by giving us all of these experiences, right? Like, it could have just been a Western. It could have just been a space drama. It didn't have to meticulously craft the space in between, but it did, and I think that's why it's excellent. So it's like, not only do we have these excellent performances, there's also the moments of the storyteller and the editor that like just went that extra mile to deliver us something layered and textured. Yeah, that's kind of why I love that show so much.
I wholeheartedly agree, and like I think in the way of the CGI is very obviously dated, and I think it would be hard to be sold on looking at these shots that you could make in Blender for your YouTube fan movie today, right? They have aged brutally over the course of the past 25 years, but what hasn't aged is the production design. The inside of Serenity is detailed to a T. You know every room, and the fact that they map out and they reuse the same set over and over again, you believe that they live there. You see the same place every time. So when you start seeing the ship in space, even though it looks clunky, the CG has aged really poorly, you believe that they're inside there because you know what the inside of the spaceship looks like. You see the characters walking around embodying that space. I think that's really a testament to good practical effects and good practical production design, because it really elevates the believability of the characters in that space, right? And kind of reconciles and makes up for the poor CGI when you're in space or on the Alliance planets. And I think it's just, that is honestly to me, I would consider the ship and the set of the ship to be a member of that cast. It's so soulful and intentionally and deliberately designed, and I think it's so inspiring.
It literally looks like the Firefly. I mean, Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be
looks like
Captain
a bug.
Obvious
It looks
here.
alive.
And it has the
Yeah.
glowing butt, and it's amazing. It's one of my favorite
Yeah.
like ship designs in any sci-fi ever.
Yeah.
Like I'm actually
I absolutely agree.
I'm like such a not a big fan of the saucer, and that thing like stays so far away from that design, and it's excellent.
Yeah.
The only saucer I can tolerate is Millennium Falcon, and it's just like something that makes any ship design great, something that makes any sci-fi design great, something that makes a lot of sci-fi CGI great, is good story. The fact that it's woven into a good story that makes you think about those things is the reason why you love it so much. Even in movies where CG is crappy, sometimes we enjoy them anyway because it makes it more believable, it makes it more real in that sense. And your brain just like, right, your suspension of disbelief can do the hard parts of, you know, going like, yeah, this is real. Like, you know, they believe it. I mean, obviously,
Absolutely.
sometimes it's so crappy that, like, you know, you end up in the Matrix, the second movie realm, when it's just like, no. You know, you just have
Yeah.
to close your eyes to maintain your suspension of
But
disbelief.
that's also not a great story, right? The
Yeah.
Matrix sequels were not really that
Yeah.
satisfying narratively.
Yeah,
so,
no.
But I think to your point, what you were saying about the way the ship looks alive, I think that's another moment of the meeting of that kind of organic Western vibe with the coldness of space, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's this very practical looking ship
Yeah.
that looks like it could exist and function, but at the same time, it looks like it has a soul.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like a living creature, and it's both at once. And that, I think, is what's at the heart of the show.
Yeah.
It's these people that are making very difficult calls, difficult choices, just like a Western.
Yeah.
While also maintaining their humanity, maintaining this tenderness that every member of the cast maintains until the very end. Even someone like Jane, who's depicted as being this very cold, hard badass, comes around and ends up advocating for people that he would have sold out months ago.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and the little elements like that, I think, elevated above a simple genre piece to being something that's genuinely pretty profound for what it is.
Yeah, because, like, you know, when everybody gets to have an arc and everybody gets to change, everybody gets character moments, and everybody is woven into a dynamic that works, it's intriguing, it's enticing, it's fun for the audience to perceive and, like, you know, associate with those characters because they feel alive, believe it or not. And honestly, like, when I think of other shows that the man worked on, like Buffy, I you know, it's responsible for a lot of my early childhood boners. You know, it was from the time when you don't really get to pick what you see on TV. You're just kind of there, and you get exposed.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, wow. But, you know, I think from watching Buffy, even at that early age, I was feeling the chemistry behind the characters. You know, like, I felt like they did things to each other that mattered because they made them matter. And the way they were emoting worked, even when the script was shit. Like, you know, it was suspenseful because, I mean, the fucking vampire slayers, you know what I mean? Like, slay. And it's lit.
Yeah.
And, like, I can't help but think that, like, Firefly has a really similar dynamic. Like, he really knows how to get his actors to do the chemistry right. You know, whatever script has to offer, they're just like, all right, let's make this alive. And I really kind of, I would like to look into how they achieved it a lot more, because having that kind of chemistry is awesome as fuck. But I gotta say, I think in many ways it is the case because every episode of the show and, like, every character is contained within their arc, so they can do it. Like, for example, Kaylee, right? Or you know, like, she's the mechanic, she is shy. You can kind of describe each one of those characters within, like, a handful of adjectives and get a really decent understanding of what they are. Because at the end of the day, it's a Western, right? They're not profoundly deep, but they commit to their character traits that the script is giving them, and then they make them alive. They do the extra work. And I think that's why it succeeds so much, and that's why so many people wanted to do more of it, and they wanted to see more seasons. And the fucking cast, and tell me if I'm wrong, but like, I heard that the cast is actually on board with making more of these things.
The cast was on board to do more, and I want to say more on your point about the characters and their arcs in a second, but you brought up a good point, which is the untimely death of Firefly, right? That is, like, almost it's known more for its cancellation in pop culture. I think more people know, oh fuck, Firefly got canceled, how miserable, than people have actually watched the show. Like, it's synonymous for something that was canceled in its prime. And I think that's something that's both a credit and a discredit to the show, is that at the end of season 1, you have tons of arcs that felt like they just began. Right? Like the character of Jane, where he is just starting to soften up. We just started to find out more about Shepherd Book, right? Like all these little threads that they had to hastily wrap up in that Serenity movie. It's really a shame. And they did rally hard, and that was actually how the Serenity movie ended up getting made, is they wanted more funding for the show. And Whedon, obviously being a Nepo baby, had contacts, and I think it was Universal that ended up making the movie. But they gave him that opportunity. But the movie just didn't gross enough. And so we didn't get more of those characters' stories, unfortunately.
There was that phase, right, in Hollywood and just like film industry in general of you know, the West anyways, when a whole bunch of sci-fi movies that had really big budgets and hopes just did not succeed. And then, you know, I think John Carter came out quite later, but like that was a part of that big phase for me. It's like they thought they figured it out, and then they didn't. And the fact that they exist in the first place is part of the problem as to why it sucks so
remember
much.
Cowboys versus
because
Aliens?
Storytelling doesn't work that way.
Like shit like that.
God.
Right? It's really interesting.
That's one of those things that we don't fucking remember.
And it's really interesting seeing that Wild West that came after something like Firefly, and imagining a world where Firefly wasn't done as dirty as it was by Fox. Because I'm sure if you go online, you can read the horror stories about them putting it on that Friday night death slot. And them siphoning attention away from it, advertising it incredibly poorly, misrepresenting it as this kind of sexy, bodacious, which like, yeah, there's a prostitute character, but it really gets more at the heart of these characters than the network was representing it. They didn't represent it as this kind of down-to-earth, intense, fun, fast-paced science fiction. They presented it as dumb shit for babies and idiots, and no one watched it.
You know, this actually makes me think, like back then, so much of the show's success, just like now in many ways, obviously, is dependent on the network treating it right. And like sometimes the network doesn't know how to do that because it doesn't know what it has in its hands.
Big time.
And I mean, Fox is guilty of that, but every other fucking company is guilty of that.
And the tragedy
We've seen this.
The tragedy of Firefly is that Firefly, as it was airing on Fox, was tracking well. If it had been airing on any other television channel, it would have been that channel's frontrunner, right? It was pulling decent numbers. It's just the fact that Fox at this point was this fucking behemoth of evening television, right? So when
you got stacks on stacks, you become pretentious douchebags. What can
and
I
you
say?
look at these shows that were airing at the time, and it's all these like Hawaii Five-0 ripoffs, right? And theoretically, they were airing more at the time, but when you compare the cultural impact of something like that to something like Firefly, Firefly is remembered, and these shows are not. So it really is a shame. And I think genuinely, if Firefly had been an HBO project and had been picked up by HBO or ABC or any of these other networks,
bro, it would have been like fucking Game of Thrones level.
And watching those character arcs and those actors live in those roles, we never got to know what fucking happened to Shepherd Book, right? Like, why is Book so intense? Like, what does he know? What are his abilities?
What happened to the man? When did he survive?
Exactly. Why is he this badass? Or, you know, what is up with Jane's relationship with his mother? He's clearly this softy on the inside. So why is he so intense? What happened with him? Like, you would have been able to explore these very intricate character dynamics. I could watch seasons of Mal and Inara's will they won't they back and forth, and because obviously you know they will, but it's just so gripping. It's so gripping and so believable, and I feel being robbed of that does a disservice to the show, because it feels like you were jerked off near completion, and then this Fox just spit in your face and walked away. And like Serenity wasn't bad. Serenity, it felt conclusive.
It had a lot going
absolutely.
for it.
It had genuine stakes, fantastic cinematography, but it wasn't the conclusion that those characters and those performances especially deserved. And that's one of the biggest issues with the show, is that it feels like an anticlimax for sure.
Yeah, and I think it also has a lot to do with the arc, right? when we talked about like the two characters that appear on the ship at the beginning of the story, right? One of them is in the icebox.
Yes.
Right? That's the first episode of the show. And then in Serenity, right, which is the feature that is supposed to happen after that, all of those events, they conclude. They both have an arc that kind of leads them to what they've been looking for all along. So inevitably, you kind of have a whole show just kind of built around them. And the continuity of everyone's arc, it doesn't follow that at all. You know, everyone else's, they start before and after. And that's why it feels like we're just getting to know a lot of the characters when the show is over, is because we like them so much, we associate with them so much, we kind of like our mind gets intrigued by them so much that we start to see them as our own little protagonists. And that's what happens when the show is good. Like, you know, you gotta say the first like maybe 5 to 6 seasons of Bones would have something similar going for it. You have all of this chemistry between all of these characters, all of the will they, won't they stuff, and it's catchy, you know. And in the end, like, many of those shows actually do that. They almost separate from their protagonist a little bit. You know, I mean, Bones is like a perfect example, just because if you think of all the other arcs that happen, they take a lot of screen time, and they're intriguing as fuck. There's like episodes are centered around other characters. Firefly just didn't have that kind of time.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And it totally could have. And the characters have so much more potential there because they're set in the world that can be expanded. You know what I mean? That's the beauty of sci-fi. You are not stuck on Earth. You can just keep going. And the charm that they have is from the sci-fi that is well written. Like, you know, the dynamic between, let's say, you know, the companion and how that's how the business is conducted between her and like the military people, like in the first episode, right? I'm just thinking of the most basic stuff that the show throws at us, because, you know, first episode, the pilots, they're meant to teach us how to watch the show. They're meant to show us these elements of the sci-fi world that they're creating and how the characters handle each other and the acting. Like, all of that is the core of how they want us to see the show. Like, that's what this is about. These are the themes, right? And it's communicated through plot, through props, through CGI, but also, most importantly, through characters. So, where I'm going with this is that we're not tied to Earth. We're in sci-fi world. These companions, right? Like, fuck, you can write so many awesome things, and people have. Like, look at the fucking fandom of Firefly out there over the decades since the show came out. Aside from all the fanfics and, you know, all the thirsty shit, which there is plenty of, and
for good reason.
That.
These characters are fucking hot
for all the right reasons. Yeah, and I mean, the show is thirsting for all of them constantly. Yeah, it was made in those simple times where you could just cast a bunch of hot people into the show and, like, nobody's gonna bat an eye. I don't mean to go back to that because I honestly kind of hate it. I love what's happening in the movie industry so much right now. And I want that to perpetuate further. But, like, you know, we just gotta see certain decades in how they came out in the light of how they were in the context and shit. Also, like, you know, this movie is full of white people, and that's definitely not helping it. And especially watching it right now. There are certain gays that I just find so.
Let's talk about that for a second, and like how Firefly is aged in that regard, because that's one of my largest critiques outside of like the dated CGI and all these things that I can kind of forgive. Joss Whedon. Joss Whedon, you created a world that's supposed to be a blend of American and Chinese cultures. There is not a single Asian person with a speaking role in your entire show. There is one person of color in your entire main cast. Listen, I'm a cis white dude. Like, I understand I'm not necessarily the person to be a mouthpiece for that, but that feels fucking weird to me.
Yeah, no.
Additionally, I think it's really fucking weird, like, the fact that the browncoats are cool. I root for Mal all the way. I want to be Mal Reynolds so fucking bad. With that being said, it's totally a metaphor for the Confederacy. And Joss Whedon even spoke about in interviews that this show, the concept for this show, was inspired by a novel called Killer Angels about Confederate expatriates wandering the ruins of the Confederacy after they were defeated. So
are you dead ass?
Completely dead ass. You can look this up. Mal and Zoe are literally space Confederates. And I understand that, like, they were the browncoats were not slavers. The people on the outer planets were not slave drivers, are not slave drivers, and the Alliance are like a fucked up evil government. Like, he does enough to separate it, but it is really weird that he didn't. They literally say in the pilot, "We will rise again." How am I supposed to feel about that,
Yeah,
Joss?
they do that. Well, I mean, it was not on the nose, you know. I don't think it creates a direct connection at any point in the show. But, like, I do have to say, while watching it, like, you know, when I watched the show the first time, I was, like, 10, and then I watched it several other times, just, like, exposed to certain episodes. So when I rewatched it, I was just, like, I was trying to understand where that doctrine is coming from, because so much of the war experience has affected our characters so much. And, like, you know, it's almost like Thomas Shelby, right? Like,
big
you're just
time.
mega traumatized by the thing, and you're just, like, living within that darkness. And I was trying to understand their philosophy better, because they're, like, you know, discipline, honor, loyalty, things of that nature, and how they're expressed through the characters. And obviously there's a fuck ton of PTSD in all of this, layers, right? But at the same time, like, what dogma are they following? If it was an army, like, what would it be? I didn't even think about it that way, because I was like, military is military. People die at war. War is fucked up, regardless of what it is and who they're fighting. So, and I think, like, the ambiguity, that's the level of ambiguity that the show was going for. But I don't doubt for a second that if that was the source material and that would be it, you know, I wouldn't be surprised, because, I mean, fuck, that happens. That's how a lot of American media works, and it doesn't know it about itself. And now I think we just learned something really horrible about something we really
it's
love.
a bummer. You can't escape the evils of the American past, even in your science fiction escapism. I think the one other element that genuinely, I think it bugs me the most. It's really hard. It's really hard, dude. I mean, Tolkien was an anti-Semite. Like, it exists in all of our escapism, unfortunately, and it's just a harsh reminder of the way the real world is.
And so was Disney. Yeah.
I feel a deeper personal attachment to Lord of the Rings than I do any of those fucking Mickey Mouse cartoons, though.
I cannot agree more.
But, so with all that being said, I think, like, the biggest thing that my last libtard rant that I want to just, like, throw into the hodgepodge is I hate how this show and Joss Whedon's work at large treats female characters. Like, I feel like
let's go there. Let's talk about that.
He has such interesting individuals in the performances. Summer Glau as River. You have Kaylee, who we've been talking about this whole time, Inara, Zoe. They are compelling characters, but they're constantly used as props and MacGuffins. There's a whole episode where, like, the main conflict revolves around someone threatening to rape Kaylee, and it's like, it's one of those things. It's like, there was not a single woman in this writer's room, was there? Because it's like, that's not interesting. You're reducing this character to, like, her sexual purity. Like, what the fuck is that? There's a whole bit with the whorehouse episode where a guy forces a woman to suck his dick at gunpoint in front of a whole crowd of onlookers, and it's like,
that shit gets
just
pretty unhinged.
Yeah, that's so insane. And at a certain point, I have to wonder, like, Joss Whedon, you're the one that's in charge of what the fuck are you smoking, dude?
Do you remember, like, you know, whenever I think about this shit, I think of the Rick and Morty moment, which is a horrible, horrible reference, but he just goes like, you gotta check out Pirates of the Pancreas, Morty. And they're not just regular pirates, they're pretty rapey. And I was like, well, Wild West. Wild West was pretty that, you know?
Yes, definitely. And I think there's ways to explore that.
Yeah, and, like, you know, the ways in which it just gets fucked up sometimes, you know, I think it connects to the themes, especially if you look at Serenity and the way that was made, you know, it really went into the darkness and, like, the horror aspects of the world altogether. The show was definitely just kind of trying to linger there, and it was doing it through violence and through acting, because acting is kind of the biggest thing it has going for it.
Definitely.
That does not justify the fact that there's just no fucking female gaze present in any of this.
Yeah, it's brutal.
And it's just important to point out, like, you know, you and I were just talking about how it's full of white people, how it's lacking female gaze in a lot of these situations, and, like, who are we to talk about this? And I just want to, like, say that, to people who are like, oh, you don't have the right to say this. I was like, first of all, this is our fucking show. We can talk about whatever
Yeah.
fuck we want.
Big time.
But also,
if I want a
this
white
is
knight,
a way.
I can. God damn it.
Yeah, but also like, we make movies, and having conversations like these and just bringing up notions like these is important for everyone to stay on the same page. And as far as I'm concerned, a really good notion, especially amongst storytellers that want to understand why good movies are what they are, why good storytelling is what it is, and why it's important to do good storytelling, because I mean, fuck, this is important. They're all on the same page. That, and by pushing these ideas forward, it does not matter what your background is, as long as you understand what it is and why it's important.
Yeah.
And why certain shows have these certain things, that we don't do them anymore, hopefully. Not as
Yes,
much.
exactly.
I don't know. That's honestly subjective as fuck. Like, everyone's experience is so drastically different these days. That's why, like, storytelling that is accessible to everybody, because it's more aware of itself and more, like,
Yeah.
I hate to use the word inclusive, but inclusive, right? It makes for better storytelling because it becomes more universal. You can
Yes, big
add
time.
more things to characters this way. And that it shows, And when you have all of your people just like speak Chinese and throw these Chinese phrases and react to them in such a drastic way,
Yeah.
like it's impactful, I was like, excellent. I really want there to be more context. I
Yeah.
really want to see what it was like. If this is so important in your show, if that background element is so important in the show, I would really like to immerse into that further. I want to see the people that use that language constantly. I want to
Yeah.
see the people that were fighting. I want to
Yes,
see all
man,
of that
absolutely.
bullshit. And I mean, I see why the story would not dwell on that. If the source material is what you just said it is, which, it totally probably is,
Yeah.
it doesn't want to go there for all the right reasons. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But again, right, that makes it, it exposes one problem over the other. So that, like, you try not to show this bullshit, so you
Yeah.
turn out, you come out insensitive in some other ways. And again, does this ruin the show? Absolutely fucking
Big
not.
time,
We love
no.
this shit.
This
We
is a
want more
great
of that.
show. And I think the
And,
only
like,
reason I'm so aggravated about it, the only reason it's so aggravating is because the show's almost perfect, right? And every time
Yep.
those moments come up, I'm completely ripped out of this world and being like, oh, wait, I'm not in the sci-fi West. I'm being presented Joss Whedon's naive, juvenile little fantasies. Like, it takes me
A
out
little
of...
bit of a perspective, yeah.
It takes me out of the world, which otherwise is almost entirely immersive, is layered, nuanced. You see different sides of the conflict between the Independents and the Alliance. It is genuinely incredibly fleshed out, has a lot of
Yes.
depth, has a lot to say about freedom, right? And
Yeah,
freedom and
all of
camaraderie. And there's a lot of very resonant images and phrases from Firefly that represent this almost like Thoreauian transcendentalism, right? The idea of you can't take the sky from me, or that line. One of my favorite things is if you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. If you can't crawl, find someone to carry you. And what a beautiful way to represent those dynamics that exist between these characters, right? Is when you're at your
excellent.
lowest, you find someone who can pick you up. And it really is. It's alive and it's breathing. And there's nitpicky things like my lib rant, or the CGI is obviously dated, and some of the scripts feel rushed because they obviously were, but it is, at the end of the day, an incredibly inspired vision. I would argue Joss Whedon's best work, and I'm saying that as someone who likes a lot of his stuff. Cabin in the Woods is
yeah.
fantastic. Dr.
He
Horrible's
makes
sing-along
excellent
blog.
things.
Yeah.
He makes excellent stuff. Cabin in the Woods is great. Again, when I think of him, I think of Firefly.
Yes, this
just not- it hasn't changed
absolutely
yet.
is. It's his opus, man. There's nothing,
Yeah.
I've seen nothing from him that resonated with me as deeply as Firefly did, and it has
And hey,
incredible heart.
yeah. And if he wants to top this, he should just make the second season.
Yes, exactly.
But here's the thing. I just really want to bring something out because I feel like it will be bad not to mention this. It's so important for me about this show. Not only does it show perfect examples of camaraderie and like evolving relationships between crew members that are also kind of like family members, like they rely on each other for each other's survival. That's like the one of these beautiful things you can get in sci-fi, space westerns, space travel stories. When you have a crew on a spaceship, the jobs that they all do, they do it to support each other, to maintain the space they're in, because space is trying to kill you, and it's really good at it. and you can't help but bond. And you see this in Cowboy Bebop, you see this in Firefly. Even if they have conflicting interests, they still work together because you don't want to become a lifeless chunk floating in a vacuum. And the way in which that camaraderie is built, the way in which that camaraderie is enforced by the captain.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this guy raised his voice at the table and he spoke poorly. He will leave the table. It's almost like you think about it as like, what a weird dad, what an annoying fucking thing. But if you think about it, outside of his PTSD and war and all that shit, because the movie kind of trying to connect that to it, like his sternness is connected to a lot of his war experience. But I just think it's like the show is incredible at propagating really good like human habits in how you have healthy relationships, in how you deal with stress, and how you discipline yourself, in how you deal with disagreements, in how people's dynamic can start to fuck itself over, and how to fix it, how to do conflict resolution. What do you do when your whole crew is like kind of against you, but like, still rely on you?
Yeah.
How to fulfill your part in a bigger function of a family or a crew, or I don't know, any group of people that, let's say, live together. Like, it gives us so much. And people who have seen Firefly, like, they get that. They learn how to be a little more empathetic. And, I can help but think that, for me personally, movies and shows that show that promote human empathy, that promote human communication, that go like, hey, these are ways in which people do these things. This is what it feels like to be a human being. This is a human condition. This is how to be good. These are the situations we get into. These are the conflicts. These are the unfair bullshit that we have to deal with. And this is how these guys are dealing with it. Do you think they're cool? I'm like, I think they're cool. I really like Kaylee. I really want them to get that on, She's just my favorite character. I just really like her, and she's wonderful.
She's lovely. She's lovely. They describe her in an interview as the purest person on the ship. If Kaylee believes something, it's true. And I really do think that in a lot of ways she is one of the show's protagonists, just because very consistently, if she says something, it's pretty much right. And it's that kindness that's at she's the person that maintains the heart of the ship. Literally, it's the engine, right? And I think, to your point, Igor, a lot of what this show does, and a lot of its brilliance, is the tenderness and the empathy with which it understands its characters' nuances and picadillos and honestly neurosis. Like, a lot of these people are pretty sick and have a lot of fucking problems, but the show looks at them with an uncritical lens, with a caring eye.
That's so true.
It allows
the same way you had like the Outlaws in the Wild West, right?
Exactly.
The Western movies see them with a gaze of empathy, or like, this is their situation, even if they're bad people. You still want to see those stories. Yeah.
And it's that anti-hero setup where it's, Mal Reynolds might not always be doing the best thing, but fuck, you understand why he's doing what he's doing at every turn. And it's like you said, it's the cold depths of space are a really good parallel for the harsh unsurvivability of the American West and those sprawling deserts, right? It's very similar thematically, and it's something
the new
that
frontier and the final frontier.
Exactly.
All of that.
I would argue it's explored a little bit better in Cowboy Bebop. I think Cowboy Bebop does most of what Firefly does better, but it's different enough and fresh enough and interesting enough in the dynamics, because I would argue the one thing that that Firefly does that beats Bebop is the connections between the characters. I believe the relationship between Wash and Zoe, or Simon and his sister River, more than I believe the relationship between Spike and Jet a little bit. And everything else works better in Cowboy Bebop.
Do you know, there's one big reason why. It's because in Cowboy Bebop, the characters are not incentivized to cooperate at any point. They all have to be pushed into doing so. While in this show, it's all built around their cooperation. They are tightly connected in the way they do their day-to-day activities, in the way they maintain their ship. therefore you have much deeper connection, deeper trust bonds. Like, I keep saying the word family throughout the episode, and like, they are fucking family. And
Yeah,
Kaylee,
absolutely.
like, and they all have a really familiar role assigned to them. Kaylee's definitely the kid that's naive and is protected by the rest. You just have a whole bunch, and I don't know. I mean, I grew up in a really big family, so I can't
Yeah.
help but relate to that directly, the kind of dynamic that they have. So
Yeah. It's excellent. It's top tier TV. It's probably one of the best of the early 2000s, if not the best I can think of. There's a lot of shows floating around in that era, like Futurama, that really stand the test of time. And I think Serenity and Firefly both belong on that pedestal as really timeless sci-fi, timeless television, an excellent use of the medium. And I think above all, it was cut too short. I think it will continue to be legendary for the fact that it was cut down in its prime and had so much more to offer us.
Yep.
I just love seeing its influence echo throughout pop culture. And yeah, stay shiny.
yeah, we're signing out. We have no idea how to outro this shit, so we're just gonna roll the outro.
Get out of here. Go home. Go to bed. Thanks for watching.
We're just gonna roll the outro animation now. All right, cool. That was awesome.